Upcycling and mending your clothes at home has seen a big jump in popularity in certain social media circles. Generally, people have been expressing that they're tired of looking like everybody else. They're tired of purchasing the same clothes. And so they've essentially become artists in their own right. For a long time, it almost seemed like a lost practice, mending and upcycling, and obviously I'm one person. I don't see everybody on the planet. But now seeing this surge in popularity, I can only hope that it'll stick around for a really long time. Consumerism and fast fashion have completely altered the way that society sees and views buying clothing. And with this rise of disposable fashion, so many people will simply just throw out the garment to buy a new one. Sometimes it could be cheaper. One day I was scrolling on my phone doing a whole lot of nothing when I was on Pinterest, and I saw this graphic about mending, and I said, oh my goodness, I'm an adult and I can do that. I'm allowed to do that. It also immediately reminded me of that Upcycling commercial that was on Disney a lot when I was a kid. I think she was talking about necklines in there. I loved that commercial.
My name is Sarah, and I love to sew. One of my favorite things to do now is upcycling.
Upcycling and visible mending adds such a beautiful personal flair to your pieces that nobody else will have. Not to mention it also builds skills and hopefully some dopamine hits away from your phone or a shopping addiction. So today in this video, I want to discuss this decline in quality and craftsmanship behind fast fashion and how fast fashion has completely altered production cycles. I also want to discuss the idea that quality fashion has always been a little bit more pricey despite what is sometimes told on social media. And then finally, I want to discuss this true cost of fast fashion, whether that's environmentally or the way it's impacting communities across the world through unethical labor practices. Now, I'm also going to show you a couple pieces that I've upcycled in my life. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Ella and I love to create video essays in hopes to promoting good natured discussions amongst people, whether that is about politics or something as fun as fashion. I do want to put a little bit of a disclaimer in saying that I'm not anti-buying things for the sake of buying. I do believe that clothes and pieces or whatever, they can exist simply for our own pleasure and for our own happiness, but it's whenever it becomes an overconsumption that we've seen real issues, and those are the ones that I really want to address. Not only the overconsumption from consumers, but the overproduction by companies. So let's get into it. So how did we get here? It really comes down to the simple idea of this decline in quality. And we're not just talking thinner fabrics and fast fading colors. I'm really talking about the entire philosophy behind the fashion industry, it seems, and behind how these clothes and garments are made. These pieces are no longer being created with the intention to last. And I'm not saying that, 20, 30 plus years ago, clothing companies were angels that only wanted the best for their customers. They still just wanted to sell. But we've seen the progression over time of how quality is no longer a selling point. This true value of skilled labor and durable materials has essentially just been swapped for a strategy of overwhelming quantity produced. Brands are churning out collections at extremely alarming rates, with some posting as much as 30,000 plus items online at a time. It's not fast fashion, it's disposable fashion. Drew at the Iron Snail was discussing his clothing brand that he was creating, and he was talking about his options in buttons. Now, when you think a button-down shirt, you think little tiny plastic buttons, but they used to be made of pretty durable wood, and I would like to think they were sewed on a little bit better, but who knows? If you have bought anything recently with buttons on it, whether that's a button-down shirt, a polo, whatever, let me know. Did it come with that little bag of extra buttons? Because I haven't bought anything recently, so I was just curious. He also discussed the change in jean buttons. He really assumed that for the jean buttons at least, it would just be the one metal option. Maybe designs would slightly look differently, but he was a little surprised that there was a plastic option, which, I don't know, should you be surprised? And you may be asking, okay, why does it matter? It matters because it is those little cheap things that companies cheap out on that make a big difference in the quality of clothing. Another question. You spend a decent amount of money on jeans, a nice pair that you think is gonna last you a minute. After a couple wears, the button breaks off. What are you doing? I guarantee you they can afford to pay for the metal buttons. It kind of reminds me of when Apple stopped putting the headphones and the charging cube in the phone boxes. I know Apple has the money for that. Not saying go out and buy new Apple phones, but you know they do. These lower quality materials that are being used isn't just the thinning fabrics. It's dangerous chemicals used in clothing's coatings. Things such as formaldehyde. That is a cancerous material. And I find it interesting because there is a difference in the US compared to even just the UK. In the UK, they have over 30 toxic chemicals banned in the use of fashion production, while in the US, we only have 3 banned. That's how you know how much the government cares about consumers. Continuing on with Drew at the Iron Snail, he was discussing a couple basic t-shirts that he owned and the differences between them. He owns a 1980s dead stock Champion t-shirt, and he said it has a bounded rib collar that is always laid flat. On the opposite side, he owns a modern day Adidas X Pharrell shirt. He points out that he has worn these shirts about the same amount of times, but the modern day Adidas shirt already has a flawed collar. Drew explains, and the thing is, the ribbing is nice, but the way they're constructing it is the faster way, and you get bad results from that after you wear things for a long amount of time. And like I said, quality used to really be a selling point, but now it's just companies wanting to keep feeding more and more trends to their consumers, so they keep buying more and more objects. If they were to produce a nice quality shirt that lasts you until you're, 50 because it's that nice and you took care of it, you're not going to want to buy another shirt from them, possibly. But if they create a low quality shirt that's going to be worn out within a couple years, you may go buy another shirt from them. And my question is, did we just accept that? Did we accept the terrible quality clothing? We wanted to satiate our consumeristic desires, essentially. We're okay with the terrible quality just so we can pay less, which, trust me, I understand not wanting to pay a lot for clothes, especially if the shirt or whatever is made out of polyester. I understand not wanting to pay $80 for a polyester shirt, but that's why we need to totally reconstruct the way we view clothing and the way we view the production of clothing and our relationship to the clothing we buy. Additionally, we are very aware that so many fast fashion companies use sweatshop labor and essentially what equates to just slave labor. Because not only are people being paid not enough to survive, but sometimes a lot of these production houses, these sweatshops, have a monopoly over the employment in certain areas. So certain communities really do not have a choice. And I don't want this to come off and me saying that I'm just totally blaming the consumer, because I'm not. As I said in the beginning of this, we need to start taking responsibility for our overconsumption, and we need to start holding companies responsible for their overproduction. But as I said, that is why we are at a point in society where we need to face our complacency in this, which sucks, and it may feel not great, but it's the first step. We need to begin reconnecting with our closets. I've taken the stance of trying to reimagine my closet as well, which means I'm really trying to wear my garments in ways that I have never worn them before, and even wearing the few pieces that I've been too scared to wear out. But whenever you're looking at clothing, you shouldn't really be thinking about, okay, well, what am I going to buy next? And I feel a lot of people may sit in that point of view, because fashion should not be quick and fast like this. We should not be consuming the amount of fashion that we are, because it should be an investment. Because quality fashion has always been a little pricier. I kind of think about that scene in The Devil Wears Prada with the cerulean blue sweater. You know what I'm talking about. It reminds me that everything comes from somewhere. This shirt that I randomly bought on a musician's site, I don't know where it came from. I don't know who created it. I mean, I know who created the design, but you know what I mean. But everything came from somewhere, and no amount of not caring is going to erase that. Somebody collected the cotton to make the thread in this, to make the fabric. Somebody designed a garment, somebody cut it, somebody sewed it, somebody did everything. And that's just the human labor of it. Fashion has always been pricey. Unfortunately, this decline in quality of fashion has really distorted society's perspective about how it should be priced. It's not uncommon to see a small brand, this hypothetical brand, is ethically sourced, ethically made, all of it, and people will get upset when they see those pricier prices, which, coming from somebody who I could not even go on right now and buy a sustainably made shirt, so that's why I'm not buying anything. But my point is, quality fashion has never been $2 shirts. A well-tailored wool coat or hand-stitched boots, those get scary price tags because they represent hours not only of skilled labor, but premium materials. In this shift that was completely ushered in by fast fashion and consumerism, and therefore capitalism, it isn't that quality has gotten more expensive, but we have begun to be sold a new unsustainable idea that high-volume, low-cost clothing could ever be normal. And that's the truth of it. Let's look at this vintage fashion catalog. There are 3 options that you could buy. You could either buy the dress and the parasol, the tote bag and the dress, or the dress and the gloves. All 3 of those are priced at $8.98. Wow, $8.98. What a steal. Let's take in for inflation. This catalog is from 1955. When you do the math, today's price comes out to $120.37. Which, could I drop $120 on a dress right now? No. We as a society, we really need to face our consumeristic ways, which is hard considering we live in a consumeristic society, a capitalistic society where this is always pushed on you. Like, I get it, it's hard. I'm not perfect. Let's look at another example. Here is a Sears ad from 1936. Some pretty cute dress options. I will say, on here it mentions cotton as well as rayon. So rayon I know is not a super premium material, but I just wanted to say that. This one is priced at $188. If you put that into the inflation calculator, it comes out to $44.05. The catalog says, fashion features, fashion quality, tailoring details usually found in dresses sold at $298, and more to celebrate our jubilee, we price them at $188. The truth is, companies always pushing stuff at us, and they always want us to buy more. It's always keep consuming, and that's being pushed on us from all angles, especially with social media. This rise in desire to meet these societal standards, especially with screen addiction these days, there has been a complete rise in, honestly, takeover of a desire to meet societal standards, which, wanting to meet society's standards has always kind of been a thing, and, it's always been a thing, but social media has exacerbated it to such an extreme level that I'm quitting social media. So it's like we're trying to be peacocks showing off our feathers. And with this change in society, it's almost as if people can essentially buy whoever they wish to be with fashion. It is argued that individuals now have greater control over their own destinies. Consumption practices, what people buy and consume, are often cited as a key mechanism by which people can demonstrate their individuality and create their own individual identities. Challenging this disposability that's baked in society can be a bit overwhelming, but reconnecting with our closets and what we keep in there is the first step. You need to start actively engaging with what you already own. So let me show you a few of the pieces that I've worked on. I do want to give a disclaimer. I'm not a seamstress. These are not laborious projects by any means. I actually don't remember if I mentioned this in the video, but I've only really started doing the upcycling and mending. I've really only started doing it recently, at least consistently. So yeah, let's get into that. So obviously the lighting is a little bit different from the first half of this video. I had to pause filming earlier because I just had to, and now I'm back to finish recording. If you've made it this far into the video or you've watched video essays at all, you've probably heard it before. Fast fashion is bad. It's bad for the planet, it's bad for people. We've seen all the videos already. But as long as not only fast fashion, but these problematic production methods, as long as they are in practice, we should continue talking about it. At least I believe so. We need to keep talking about it because we are still so disconnected from the true cost of that $5 shirt that you bought. The fast fashion industry now produces double the amount of clothing that it did 20 years ago. The industry is responsible for 10% of the world's global carbon emissions each year. And the Ellen MacArthur Foundation states that it uses 93 billion cubic meters of water annually. That is 4% of the world's drinking water and is equal to 37 Olympic-sized swimming pools every single year. But it's not just drinking all of our water, it's polluting it. The French Environment Agency found that the textile industry is responsible for 20% of the world's water pollution. As Bridging the Gap says, it'd be one thing if all these new garments were finding homes where they would be worn for years. However, it's increasingly consumers in wealthier nations who purchase these clothes despite already having well-stocked closets. 20% of clothing purchased in the US are never worn at all. If they do get worn, fast fashion clothes are worn on average 7 times before they're discarded. In the US alone, we will heap 21 billion tons of clothing on our landfills each year. And because of the heavy use of polyester and chemical coatings, much of this discarded clothing will end up in landfills and waterways for a very long time. Estimates currently put it at 200 years. Now you might be thinking, but I donate my clothes, so what does that mean? And secondhand shopping is great. In theory, I definitely recommend going secondhand shopping before you go and buy a new piece. But we're at a point where our system has become so incredibly flooded and overwhelmed with the amount of just stuff coming through. It has created its entirely own monstrous problem. The global north ships hundreds of millions of garments each year to African countries like Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria. In Ghana, they call them Obroni Wawu, dead white man's clothes. And while the intention to send old clothing to quote-unquote impoverished countries or countries we just simply view as lesser than us, the intention behind it may be good, but the reality at this point has become far darker. Because in 2021, out of the 900 million clothes imported into Kenya alone, that is just one African country, out of that 900 million, 458 million of that were pure garbage, unwearable, unusable, which makes sense. We are facing a decline in quality, so any secondhand clothes that were to go to them are also going to be worse as well. Emmanuel Ajab, a top importer in Ghana, says it plainly. 17 years back, it was good, but now what they are bringing to Africa, they are continuing to reduce the quality. They think we're not like human beings. You cannot just pick something up from your dustbin and give it to someone. In this case, they're doing this to us. There are mountains of discarded textiles all over these African countries. This is the physical manifestation not only of consumers' overconsumption, but companies' overproduction. Liz Ricketts, a fashion waste campaign manager who has documented this disaster in Ghana for over a decade, she explains it bluntly. Waste is a part of the business model of fashion. A lot of brands overproduce by up to 40%. They overproduce like that because it's a volume-based game. They're going to produce as much as possible in hopes to sell you as much as possible. They never, ever want to miss out on a possible sale. And unfortunately, it's not just fast fashion brands who are overproducing like this. Luxury brands do this as well. There have been multiple instances of luxury brands being exposed for simply destroying their old inventory in stock instead of just, either recycling it for new product or donating it. There's a whole slew of options to do. To make it even worse, such a majority of clothes these days are made in a way that it is completely impossible to recycle them. Because of the quality of the material used and the choice in materials used, you cannot recycle them, and they are bound to harm the earth in some way. They were designed to be trash. And you really need to take a step back and think, why would a company design a piece of clothing to be trash? It is so, at one point, that piece is going to be unwearable far sooner than it would have been if they put actual time, effort, and quality into it. And then guess what? That shirt is now unwearable. You're gonna go buy a new one. The consequences of this overconsumption is catastrophic. Landfills like the World Bank-funded Capone site in Accra are filling up years ahead of their scheduled timeline. This landfill was set to last for 15 years in order to slow down the textile waste crisis, and it was full after 5 years it took to fill that. That is a direct result of overconsumption, specifically in the global north. One night, this landfill caught fire. Due to the poorly compacted clothes in there, due to the overfilling, a methane bubble was trapped, which caused a fire that raged for 11 months. A former employee, Jerry Joe Johnson, explains the terror. Things are exploding. Everybody is running. What happens when toxic chemicals burn? They're poisoning the air. Right. Not only that, the clothes themselves, the textiles, wash into waterways. They clog drainage systems, cause flooding, and release microplastics into the ocean. On top of that, if flooding happens, that's breeding ground for mosquitoes, which will therefore be a breeding ground for disease potentially. Greenpeace says, the connection between poor fashion disposal and water pollution in Africa is undeniable. In Ghana, it is evidenced by the conditions of the Coral Lagoon, whose banks consist of a landfill that is mostly made up of unused clothing shipped from the global north, which was once a source of livelihood and recreation for Accra's residents, now ranks among the most polluted water bodies globally, with the fashion waste buildup along its shores worsening the situation. So what now? What do we do now? We need to start shifting our habits, challenging this complacency in this system, because we should want more from companies, and we should want more for the people that these companies are harming with their evil practices. Unfortunately, as Liz Ricketts again says, we've almost begun to see convenience as a right. We have a right to these clothes, to whatever we want, whenever we want it, but that's not true, because sometimes we simply do not get what we want when we want it. You may have to wait a little bit, and that's okay. We should be okay with waiting before we buy something. It shouldn't freak us out. And this isn't a new idea. Edward Bernays, in his 1928 book, Propaganda, kind of dives in on the way companies keep pushing products on people constantly, all the time, never stopping. Mass production is profitable only if its rhythm can be maintained. It must maintain constant touch through advertising and propaganda to assure itself the continuous demand. There is a constant pressure, essentially, to be continuously consuming new items, continuously be spending money on new things. They don't care what they're doing to the environment, what they're doing to these people, as long as they're making money. And unfortunately, the luxury sector of fashion really loves to kind of hold themselves on a high horse, I guess. They really like to position themselves above all this and really ignore the fact that they are very deeply complicit. I've recently really been enjoying watching a fashion commentator on YouTube named Katie Robinson. Definitely recommend going to check her out. She was really discussing this idea of luxury brands just kind of turning a blind eye to the ties between fashion in general and the fashion industry and the impact on the earth and on unprotected communities. She talked about that during Paris Men's Fashion Week. In all these behind the scenes videos, all of the models at all times had like 4 fans on them because of the crazy heat waves. On top of the fact this was the same time that there was unprecedented flooding throughout Paris, you have the top names in these big fashion brands hiding behind their doors, ignoring it. They refuse to see their complacency in it, because luxury brands are no stranger to things like sweatshops and unethical labor. Take LVMH. They're the conglomerate that owns Louis Vuitton, Dior, Sephora, Fenty Beauty, Marc Jacobs, Celine, a slew of wine and spirits brands. We have watches. You have it all. And their CEO or chairman is Bernard Arnault. He is one of the on-again, off-again richest men in the world. And he was just so kind, so generous and nice that he let LVMH donate £1 million, a whole £1 million, to fight deforestation in the Amazon. In 2024, LVMH recorded nearly $88 billion in revenue. £1 million? You're so kind. Oh, that definitely is going to get you into the pearly gates of heaven. One of Bernard Arnault's children made a comment about how luxury fashion is inherently sustainable. Yeah, I am so sorry. You cannot claim sustainability when you're linked to Uyghur forced labor camps in China. You employ sweatshops in Milan where a worker is paid the price of a single sweater for a whole month's work. You're sustainable? Yeah, okay. The true cost is not just the $5 or $10 you paid for that shirt. It is the water poisoned, the carbon emitted, the landfills absolutely mountainized, and lives totally exploited throughout the entire world. It is such a destructive cycle, and it's time that we not only need to start paying attention, but we need to start taking action, even if that means sacrificing things in our own lives. It's really time that we all start paying attention to the forces that kind of made this possible, because this cycle of consumption is not exactly natural, it's engineered almost. America is a country, in my opinion, that's based on buying, selling, consuming, making a profit. This way of life became pretty prominent in not the most recent turn of the century, but the one before that, where shops and department stores, they really started to pop up far more frequently. William Leach writes in his 1933 book, Land of Desire, Merchants, Power, and the Rise of a New American Culture. The cardinal features of this culture were acquisition and consumption as the means of achieving happiness, the cult of the new, the democratization of desire, and money value as the predominant measure of all value in society. Oh, so that's American culture. Cool. It's a time around where they were tackling labor struggles like 7-day work weeks, 14 to 16-hour days. People really started to indulge a little bit more in life's little pleasures, which they should be able to. Going from the Gilded Age into a more progressive era means a lot more people were delving into their desires rather than just work, industrial revolution, mass production. People were actually able to enjoy it a little bit more. Like I said, department stores were popping up a lot more frequently around places, and these were places that were meant to be big and exciting, and they were supposed to draw people in because they were dazzling and almost dreamlike. Shopping was an experience. It was not just something you did quick in and out, now we just do it online type of thing. They switched from simply informing people about an actual product's features and the way it works, but instead they're more so weaponizing the emotion economy. They're creating more of a psychological desire for it. We see the selling of lifestyles is so normalized these days, but in the early days it was new and it captured people. And now here we are. We are in a society that is so consumed by what we want and what we want to buy that we're not even focused on the people around us anymore. It's almost like when people on TikTok were Jane Birkifying their bag, and it wasn't even like they were going out and just using it and Jane Birkifying it by living with it. They were literally like smacking it and like doing all these things, and like they were like curating this fake lifestyle. And obviously do whatever you want, but like it just was interesting. In all seriousness, us as consumers, we really need to reconnect with our closets rather than just thinking about what we're gonna buy next. What else do we need? What other thing do I need to add to this that I don't have? Reconnect and reimagine how you can use something that you've worn a million times but use it totally different, and it's exactly what you need. We need to reconnect with our clothes by researching what they're made of, where those materials come from, how people farm them. And I know it seems like a lot of work, but you know what they say, knowledge is power. And in my opinion, a really great way to reconnect with your clothes is by starting in the upcycling and mending area. Not only does this help us reconnect with the process of creating a piece, it also helps us create a greater appreciation for those objects that we already own. Additionally, it's dopamine away from your phone, away from shopping. I think I already said that in this video, but you know what I mean. Now, I did want to end this video off on a little bit of positive news, just so we're not talking about how the clothes we buy are destroying the earth and we're destroying the earth. I think it's important to combine it all with some good news, so let's get into that. If you are following the fashion industry at all, you've probably seen France attacking ultra fast fashion. And I've seen people saying they're banning fast fashion, they're banning Shein, they're doing these things. And while what they're doing is really great, I just want to let you guys know they could be doing a lot more. Sorry, I know this is meant to be good news. Basically, they're adding an amendment on to an already existing climate change bill, the existing anti-waste and circular economy laws. And this new amendment would impose penalties on companies using hyperproduction as a business model, essentially, like Shein and Temu. And while I obviously do agree that we need to start targeting places like Shein and Temu a little bit and hold them accountable for the way they run, I have noticed numerous people pointing out that there are so many other fast fashion brands that are just seemingly missed from this bill. It seems that the laws around it work perfectly just so companies like Zara and H&M and Boohoo won't be facing these penalties or anything like that. So yes, there is a lot of room for this bill to be better, but it is one of the first times we've seen a government attack this hyper fast fashion company so head on like this. So I do think it's worth talking about, obviously. Okay, so this next one was so hard not to go on an entire deep dive about it, and I can already tell you I'm going to be making a video on it, so be on the lookout. I was just looking for some positive, news in the environment fashion world when I stumbled upon a headline about how Botswana was taking some hits to their economy because of the increase in people buying lab-grown diamonds. And I've seen a little bit about the debate about lab-grown diamonds versus mined diamonds, as a lot of the time diamonds that are being mined are not being mined ethically and people are not being paid properly or at all. But yeah, basically the good news is there has been a really big increase in people's interest in buying lab-grown diamonds. CNN reported, according to jewelry industry analyst Paul Zeminski, sales of these man-made diamonds have increased from under $1 billion in 2016 to just under $12 billion in 2022. Like I said, it was really hard to not start a deep dive on this while I was finishing up this video, because I was reading about the De Beers company, which I know them because I talked about them in my initial Art is Resistance video, because they created the diamonds and that necklace that Emma Chamberlain wore to the Met Gala that people were upset about. I said, oh, I know that name. Basically, a very quick TLDR on De Beers, from what I saw from the very few articles that I read, is that they essentially run as a cartel. Allegedly, from some things I saw people saying, allegedly. They did things such as taking advantage of apartheid South Africa to get cheap labor, and they are continuously implementing unethical labor practices. On top of the fact that there are debates about how rare diamonds actually are and if we should be charging that much for them, on top of the fact that they're not being mined ethically. Not to say that there's not a single company out there mining them ethically, but you get what I mean. The point is, let's buy some lab-grown diamonds. Who cares? So where does this leave us? Because we've seen how fast fashion has not only reshaped our expectations, but it has convinced us that clothing should be cheap, abundant, and disposable. We've seen the decline in quality, not just in the fabrics, but in the very artistry of how our clothes are made. And we are currently facing the true cost of this convenience. A cost that has polluted rivers, emits greenhouse gases, and maintains absolutely monstrous mountains of textile waste that are unfairly burdening communities in the global south. It is a heavy reality, and it can make looking at our belongings feel very overwhelming, and I've had moments too when I feel guilty almost. But there's another way to see it and to approach it. It's not just about suddenly having a closet that's full of expensive, ethically made, sustainably sourced, perfect pieces. It is simply just about the start in attempting to shift our perspective from one of consumption to hopefully one of care. Care for our belongings, for our clothes, for people that we may not know and we may never see, but we should want better for them. This idea of upcycling and fashion personalization has really seen a surge in popularity recently, especially with this discussion around hobbies online, because not only does adding alterations, I guess, on your clothes, does it help build skills, but mending your own pieces is gonna give you so much more appreciation for the things that you own. So if you see yourself or you find yourself consuming a lot of content about upcycling and mending, but you never seem to find yourself actually doing it, because that's what I did for a really long time, I urge you, pick up a needle and some colorful thread and embroider a few designs on some clothes. That's all you gotta do. After I did that, I was hooked. I am hooked. Every piece I look at, how can I change that? Like, I actually need to slow down, because not every piece of my clothing needs mended or anything. Some of them are fine as is. Fashion is fun, but unfortunately, it's been abused almost in a way that has harmed so much in our world, and we are gonna have to face some of the consequences. So I urge you, start looking for ethically sourced clothes. They are going to be more expensive. That's just going to make you really contemplate, do I need to buy this? And when your clothes are damaged in some way, really try and think about how you can use it before you just throw it out. Yeah, it's a shirt, but you could upcycle it into something totally different. Simply just cutting it up into rags. Something as simple as that. Remember, there's still the reuse part in reduce, reuse, recycle. Also, do some research to see if there's any textile recycling places in your area. By doing that, you're gonna probably have to research a little bit more about the materials that are in your clothes, if they're even able to be recycled. But as I said earlier, you're just gonna be educating yourself more, and knowledge is power, so there's no harm, no foul. In all honesty, this isn't about moving backwards in terms of the way we live. It's more about we need to have a bit more of a thoughtful future. Not even just talking about creating clothes in the fashion industry. It's more so just this convenience thing. We're so quick to implement new things into our lives because of convenience that we never even ask if we should, you know? Hopefully, we will reach a point where we will stop seeing our clothing and our belongings as so easily disposable, but I really enjoyed making this video, like a lot actually. It was a lot of fun writing this script. I learned a lot and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please leave your thoughts down below. I don't know how many of you guys are fashion people, but I know a lot of you guys are probably pro-environment, so I think it goes hand in hand, so I think a lot of you would find this interesting. Let me know if you're gonna attempt a little bit of mending or upcycling. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Please like, subscribe for more videos. I try and post every single Wednesday. So far I have. This one may be going up late. I have all my sources and people I mentioned linked down below, so if you want to do any further reading, or if you want to go check out Katie Robinson on YouTube, because she really inspired me to make this video. Okay, I think that's all my end of video ramblings. Hope you guys enjoyed. Bye bye.